Welcome to the Hoja on Architecture podcast. The Architecture of the Myth. Chapter 10. Myth Never Ends. Modern Space as Ancient Thought. Throughout this season, we have treated Greek mythology not as a collection of distant stories, but as a way of thinking spatially. We began with chaos, where space did not yet exist as an ordered condition. We moved through the emergence of vertical hierarchy, the authority of Olympus, the identity of the city, the fluidity of the sea, the thresholds of the underworld, the strategies of the labyrinth, the alignment of temples, and the production of architecture through fire and making. Each chapter revealed a different spatial logic, and each myth became a conceptual model. What emerges is not a sequence of stories, but a system of ideas that continues to shape how we understand space. We often speak of mythology as something belonging to the past, as though it were replaced by science, technology, or modern forms of knowledge. Yet the spatial patterns embedded in these myths continue to structure how we think, design, and inhabit space. The language may have changed and the materials may have evolved, but the underlying logics remain surprisingly persistent. Myth, in this sense, is not something we leave behind. It is something we carry forward, often without noticing. Consider the idea of vertical hierarchy. From Olympus to contemporary skylines, elevation continues to signify power, prestige, and control. The tallest building in a city rarely functions solely as a container. It becomes a statement that marks dominance within the urban field. What mythology once expressed through gods, architecture now expresses through steel, glass, and economic ambition. The symbolic meaning of height has not disappeared, it has been rearticulated. Similarly, the concept of the axis, explored through Greek temples, remains central to how we organize important spaces. Government buildings, memorials, and institutional architecture continue to rely on alignment to create meaning. Axes guide movement, frame views, and structure experience, establishing a sense of order that feels both spatial and ideological. The sacred has not vanished, it has been translated into new forms of authority. The labyrinth, too, has not disappeared. It has become more subtle and more pervasive. Contemporary environments often employ controlled complexity to shape behavior, from shopping centers to digital interfaces. Navigation systems guide us, but they also direct us, shaping decisions through spatial organization. We move through environments that are designed not only for efficiency, but for influence. The logic of disorientation remains embedded in modern design practices, even when it appears invisible. Even the underworld persists, not as a literal realm of the dead, but as a spatial imagination of what lies beneath. Underground infrastructures, data centers, transport systems, and hidden networks form an entire layer of contemporary life that remains largely unseen. These spaces support everyday existence while remaining outside direct experience, reinforcing the distinction between visible and invisible domains. The boundary between surface and depth continues to structure how we understand space. The sea, once a space of uncertainty and connection, now finds its counterpart in global networks. Flows of information, capital, and movement create a fluid spatial condition that mirrors the maritime world of ancient Greece. Stability and mobility remain in tension. We build cities, yet we remain constantly in motion, navigating systems that extend far beyond physical boundaries. And perhaps most importantly, the act of making, embodied by Hephaestus, continues to define architecture at its core. From digital fabrication to robotic construction, the processes through which space is produced have become more complex, yet the fundamental principle remains the same. Architecture is not only designed, it is made, and this act of making continues to shape both form and meaning. What changes across time is not the existence of these ideas, but their expression. Mythology does not disappear, it transforms, adapting to new materials, technologies, and cultural conditions. The patterns remain, even as their appearances evolve. This continuity suggests that architecture is not only a response to present conditions, but also a reflection of long-standing ways of thinking. This is why mythology matters. Not because it tells us what to believe, but because it reveals how we think. It exposes patterns that operate beneath conscious awareness and shows that the way we organize space is never neutral. Deeper assumptions about order, power, movement, and meaning always shape it. Architecture, in this sense, becomes a continuation of myth through built form. When we design a building, we are not starting from nothing. We inherit ways of thinking about space that have been developed over centuries. Some of these ideas are formal, others are cultural, and many are embedded so deeply that they appear natural. Myth provides a way of making these assumptions visible, allowing us to recognize the continuity between ancient thought and contemporary design. To recognize this continuity is not to reduce architecture to repetition, but to understand its depth. The contemporary world does not simply reproduce ancient patterns, it transforms them. New technologies, new materials, and new social conditions introduce variation, but they rarely eliminate the underlying structures. We do not leave myth behind, we build upon it. This recognition also changes how we interpret architecture. Buildings are not only functional objects, they are expressions of thought. They carry within them traces of older ideas, reconfigured for new contexts. A skyscraper, a museum, a digital interface, or even a virtual environment can all be read through the same conceptual lenses we applied to mythology throughout this season. The question, then, is not whether myth still exists, but where it has moved. It may now reside in the systems we design, the networks we inhabit, and the environments we navigate daily. It is embedded in the assumptions we rarely question, shaping our understanding of space without announcing itself. To study myth, therefore, is not to look backwards, but to look more carefully at the present. This season has been an attempt to read mythology as a form of spatial intelligence, not as fiction, but as a framework, and not as narrative, but as structure. In doing so, it reveals that architecture is not only about buildings, but about the ideas that organize them, and those ideas are older than we think. In the next season, we will move from myth to another transformation that is already reshaping how design itself is taught, practiced, and understood. If mythology reveals how we have always thought about space, artificial intelligence is beginning to change how we think through it, introducing new forms of mediation, authorship, and design thinking. This concludes Chapter 10 of The Architecture of the Myth, Myth Never Ends, Modern Space as Ancient Thought. Thanks for listening. See you in the next season.